Right, so another day, another attempt to derail the Gaza ceasefire, as Benjamin Netanyahu is desperate to do. The sooner it's all over, the better it is for him, and the more his hard-right coalition partners will like it. Netanyahu can get away with breaking the deal, changing the remit, because he knows most world media will happily provide the cover for him that he needs. Various media outlets and world leaders will always blame Hamas for anything going wrong, regardless of whether they are involved or not. And of course, being very conscious of that fact, Hamas are treading carefully as well, so as to not be saddled with the blame so easily. And this is very much what has now come to pass in the latest round of hostage releases, where Hamas released 4 young women as per the ceasefire agreement in that most recent release. Israel have kicked off because all 4 were serving in the IDF at the time that they were captured, and have now demanded that Hamas release civilian hostages, having named one in particular, Arbel Yehud, on more than one occasion now. Whilst all of this was going on, though, Israel blocked the passage of Gazans through the Netzarim corridor to enable them to return to the north of Gaza. Not to their homes, as mainstream media sources keep saying. Their homes are almost certainly no longer standing after all. But this blatant breach of the ceasefire has been allowed to stand regardless too. Now, a day later, finally having been overcome, though. It is baiting Hamas all the way. It is challenging them to break the ceasefire, daring them to step a foot out of line. And the longer they don't rise to it, well, the more desperate Netanyahu is getting to try and find a scapegoat. Right, so Israel has changed the deal, a breach of the ceasefire, as this blatantly is. But knowing that Netanyahu is desperate for Hamas to be blamed for any break in the ceasefire, they are functionally giving in to his whims right now, knowing it is hurting him more to do so than it is hurting them. Such has been the case with the blocking of people from returning to northern Gaza. Having been driven south, ethnically cleansed from the north by the IDF as they have been, thousands gathered there wanting to go back where they came from and rebuild the lives Israel have destroyed through 15 months of genocide, razing the Gaza Strip to the ground as they have done so. It's not like Hamas don't know what Israel is up to here either, citing their flimsy pretext to not abide by the terms of the ceasefire themselves, stemming from the Israel not liking the hostages that Hamas released this time around, because all 4 were currently serving in the IDF. They were military, therefore, not civilian. Never mind that the deal at this stage only calls for the release of women and children. Nope, Netanyahu needed an excuse to whinge, and he lashed out at Hamas by refusing to open up the Netzarim corridor as per agreement because they released the wrong sort of hostages. Well, the Gaza government media office issued a statement over this, making clear just who is breaking the ceasefire and exactly what they thought of it. The Israeli occupation continues to evade the ceasefire agreement and continues to procrastinate and obstruct the implementation of the obligations relating to the decision it signed with the Palestinian resistance, which stipulates the withdrawal of the occupation forces from the Netzarim corridor after the resistance handed over 4 Israeli female soldiers. Despite the resistance implementing part of the agreement and handing over the female soldiers, the occupation, as usual, continued its policy of procrastination and refused to abide by its commitments. This clear evasion of the agreement reflects the true face of the Israeli occupation policies based on arrogance and lack of credibility, and is a blatant disregard for the efforts made to alleviate the suffering of our great Palestinian people. Tens of thousands of our honourable people are eagerly awaiting the opening of the humanitarian corridor in the Netzarim corridor, as its continued closure exacerbates the deteriorating humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. Children, women, the sick and the elderly are all suffering from a severe shortage of basic needs, and this occupation behaviour can only be described as a deliberate humanitarian crime aimed at increasing the suffering of our people as an extension of the genocidal war that we have been seeking to stop since it began. We hold the Israeli occupation fully responsible for the serious humanitarian repercussions resulting from its intransigence and refusal to abide by the agreements. We call on the mediating parties and the international and regional parties sponsoring this agreement to immediately pressure the Israeli occupation to force it to respect its commitments. Our great Palestinian people need to combine all efforts to guarantee their legitimate rights and protect their national interests. We call on the international community to assume its moral and legal responsibilities and stand up to the occupation's practices that constitute a flagrant violation of international laws and norms. Our Palestinian people deserve freedom and dignity and will not back down from defending their legitimate rights by all available means. Wonderful, another ready-made Netanyahu-induced impasse, as all of that basically amounts to. Thousands of Gazans lined up along one of the most heavily fortified Israeli positions in Gaza, the Netzarim corridor that they built across the middle of the Strip, supposed to be let through as per the agreement, But Israel cite the wrong sort of hostages. They don't want these hostages, they're the wrong ones. They want others. They're now naming them too. And certainly some on the Israeli side ramped up the precarity of the situation as a sign of the need to resume attacking Gaza, because clearly Hamas can't be trusted to honour the ceasefire. How dare they let the wrong women out first? Never mind, over in the West Bank, Israel is still very much taking hostages themselves. Never mind the Netzarim corridor remaining a barrier against the ceasefire. Did Hamas take the bait, though? No, they didn't. But they did make clear why Israel was stalling amidst all of their whinging with a brief statement of their own, saying, Hamas is following up with the mediators on the Israeli occupation's prevention of the return of the displaced from the south to the north, which constitutes a violation and breach of the ceasefire agreement. The occupation is stalling under the pretext of captive Arbel Yehud, even though the movement informed mediators that she is alive and gave all the necessary guarantees for her release. We hold the occupation responsible for obstructing the implementation of the agreement, and we are following up with the mediators with full responsibility to reach a solution that leads to the return of the displaced. Oh, hard luck, baby. They went to the mediators and not for their guns. And just to make life all the more painful for Netanyahu, they made a new concession to give him exactly what he said he wanted, which in truth was the last thing that he wanted. And a grating statement from Netanyahu's office read, after firm negotiations, Israel will allow Gaza residents to cross into the northern part of the Strip starting tomorrow morning. An additional phase of prisoner releases will be implemented next Thursday, during which Arbel Yehud, Agam Berger and another prisoner will be released. And next Saturday, 3 more prisoners will be released. Israel also received from Hamas a list of the status of all prisoners in the first phase. Extra releases and an update on hostage statuses. But if you really want to underline the petulance of this move, given that Israel kicked off over Hamas releasing 4 IDF soldiers, the concession they won, getting their own way, well, Agam Berger, who was mentioned in that statement, also happens to be another IDF soldier. A claim going around in some Western media outlets, though, the New York Times as a for instance, is a claim that Arbel Yehud is the last civilian woman being held by Hamas, in which case she was guaranteed to be released in phase 1 of the ceasefire anyway. So this obstruction and dispute over IDF women or civilian women being released in whatever order is even more pathetic and unnecessary. And without the list of Hamas hostages actually having been made public, we can't verify if Yehud actually is the last woman being held, only having Israel's word for that, and we know what that's worth. Israel, for the record, will be releasing more Palestinian hostages as well in exchange. This will be an additional exchange of hostages to be seen later this week. Nonetheless, at the end of the day, the Netzarim corridor was opened and Gazans were finally able to head north for the first time in months. I have a short clip to share to finish this video on a really positive note. But before I get to that, there are still, even now, those trying to derail this latest agreement, and one such person doing that would be the tin pot despot Itamar Ben-Gvir, currently outside of the Israeli government by his own choosing, but champing at the bit to rejoin as soon as Netanyahu starts up the genocide again, which is his condition for coming back into government. Such a nice chap, isn't he? Well, he took to Twitter and he said, the opening of the Netzarim corridor this morning and the entry of tens of thousands of Gazans into the northern Gaza Strip are images of Hamas's victory and another humiliating part of the reckless deal. This is not what complete victory looks like. This is what complete surrender looks like. The heroic IDF soldiers did not fight and give their lives in the Strip to make these images possible. We must return to war and destroy. Therefore, the clip I'm about to show you will have him crying into his soup as much as it cheered my heart, and hopefully it will yours too. The indomitable spirit of the Palestinian people and their determination to survive and persist against all odds in their own land, Itamar Ben-Gvir, is unbowed, unbroken and unbeaten. This comes all the more as a result of news coming to light following an investigation by Israel's own Ynet news outlet, which has cast new and devastating light for Israel on their version of events of what exactly happened ahead and on the night of October 7, 2023. Their version of events now criminalised, if you dare to say it's not true, and the demands for independent investigation have now grown louder than ever as a result. So get all the details of that massive story, actually, on this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do go, however, so as to not miss out on new daily content and help support the channel too, which is enormously appreciated. I'll leave you with that bit of footage now, Gazans crossing back into the north. These two boys have quite the head for heights, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.
بنحبها طول وعرض وانا جاي وبدق